Welcome. I'm Ben Marzouk with Evershed Sutherland, and I'm joined here by my colleague John Walsh. Today, we're going to be talking about the SEC's recently issued examination priority letter for 2020 from the Office of Compliance, Inspections, and Examination as part of our Asset Management Regulation in 2020 Videocast series. The SEC's examination priority letter from 2020 was very focused on the protection of retail investors. More specifically, within that focus, they decided to aim their target at senior investors, retirement investors, and teachers and military personnel. The focus on senior investors and retirement investors isn't entirely surprising, given the SEC's attention that they devote towards the protection of that group of retail investors. But the inclusion of teachers and military personnel was a new addition that we saw in this recent letter.
Another topic that OCIE is going to focus on is fraud, sales practices, and conflicts of interest. We would expect the SEC's examination program to be focused on fraud and sales practices. That's a perennial item. An interesting new development, though, in this year's report, they are tracking the accounts that they verified. And they report that they verified more than 3 billion of them, worth approximately $1.5 trillion. It's an interesting new metric. An interesting new way to look at the examination program.
The SEC's letter also focused on Regulation Best Interest and Form CRS, the new standard of conduct that the SEC recently adopted in June 2019 and goes into effect on June 30th of 2020. As we get closer to June 30th, 2020, broker-dealers and investment advisors are going to be very focused on making sure that they're complying with the requirements of Reg BI and Form CRS, and that seems to be a focus of the SEC's examination and inspections priority letter.
The SEC will also be looking at dual registrants. This makes sense. Dual registrants have really come to dominate in the retail space. And OCIE has indicated that they are going to make the compliance programs that these dual registrants have in place a priority. In the letter, they give some topics that they intend to focus on, but I think the most important takeaway is that they're going to be looking across the organization, and anyone who's working at a dual registrant should be ready to do the same.
Another major priority in 2020 is going to be fintech, digital assets, and robo-advice. This is also not surprising as it's gained a lot of attention from the regulators. More specifically, regarding digital assets, the SEC's priority letter seemed focused on cryptocurrencies and other digital representations of more traditional physical security certificates. Within this focus on digital assets, they did uniquely call out pricing and valuation concerns, custody issues and risk of loss, and then outside business activities to the extent that any associated person of a broker-dealer or investment advisor might be engaged in activities with respect to digital assets.
Another priority, never before examined advisors, which is an interesting one because it's an old perennial again. It's been on the priority list for many years, but there's a new development that makes it interesting. Apparently, the SEC has covered 15% of the advisor population in 2019. Which means there's no cycle, but if there were a cycle, that would be about 6.5 years. So I think the takeaway here for everyone is if you've never been examined or if it's been a long time since you've been examined, you should get ready to hear from the examination program pretty soon.
And then finally, the OCIE 2020 priority letter focused on anti-money laundering concerns for broker-dealers and investment companies, not investment advisors because there's no AML rules specific to them yet. And within the AML focus for broker-dealers and investment companies, the SEC honed in on suspicious activity reports and customer due diligence requirements.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. For more information on asset management regulation in 2020 and other bottom line videos, please join us at eversheds-sutherland.com.